The art of leadership is helping groups make the best decision, get them to buy in and go implement. And that's really what we teach people and train people to do.
Hey, you all, welcome back. I'm pumped about today's episode. If you would have just seen the previous 10 minutes, Evan and I were just laughing and bantering and beating up, but I could tell from his engagement that he is going to share a tremendous amount of wealth and knowledge that we can integrate into our businesses. And it's not so often that I interview someone and talk to them and have a conversation that I walk away. I always learn something, but I don't always take things away that I can implement in my business. And I think today is going to be one of those. So I'm excited to have Evan Unger. He's someone who literally helps leaders and teams turn their meetings and leadership culture from frustrating to high impact. Evan spent 25 years driving change across healthcare, pharma, and global teams, and now brings that know-how into how we lead, collaborate, and get real results from our interactions. Evan, great to have you here today.
It is great to be here, Mark. I'm excited to do this.
You said right before we started, really what I do is teach people how to collaborate, and now we're doing it more on screens than we do in person. What's that mean?
Well, let me give you a little background on me. Got out of business school. I'm a little bit older than you. In '89, when worked for Merck, giant pharma, right? And back then there was squawk boxes, right? That we used to run meetings with squawk boxes, and I didn't even have email till '94. So back then we were teaching people how to collaborate, sitting in rooms together. Decades went along, that's what we're doing. And all of a sudden technology came along. WebEx, live meeting, clients start saying, Evan, we're leading things on global teams on screens now. Can you help us? And I resisted, in all honesty. It sounded kind of tedious. Pandemic hits, everything went virtual. And all we do now is teach people high stakes collaborative facilitation on screens, right? And that's really how the world's changed over my long career.
So as we're going to get into that, right, and talk about culture and change and collaboration in organizations, but something just struck me that you resisted change, but then the pandemic came and you were forced to if you wanted to stay relevant.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
What do you do with that, knowing that even you having an MBA, working in pharmaceuticals, and you were actually on the forefront of organizational change and helping people go through this in collaboration? And you subconsciously and consciously were pushing back until you were forced to.
Yeah. Well, I started doing some virtual facilitation, but the reality is when the pandemic hit, literally all my work, which was all face-to-face, evaporated. It just just dripped off. And I was sitting there licking some wounds. I was like, at this age, I'm not sure I'm even employable in a large company, having not been in one for 30 years. B, I definitely don't want to work inside a large company because I know the suffering of being in a large company. And for a little while, I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to get through this. My wife said to me, you got to figure this out, And so literally I was meditating and I was like, wait a minute, everything I do applies virtually. So I just, on the almost back of a napkin kind of thing, redesign what we were doing and started doing it virtually. But I'm a human being. I resisted change, but my hand was forced, right? Necessity is the mother of invention, and I had to reinvent myself.
So if we by default resist change, it must be solving for like survival or something. It must be some component of the subconscious. Why is it so essential? Because we're going to sit here and talk about maybe the founding of a company and working with the entrepreneurs and establishing what the culture is going to be. But then I can imagine you also coming into these established organizations, because you just said working in a big corporation, you're like, that's mind numbing. So are those two complete, from a consulting standpoint, two complete different ways to lead and to teach collaboration? That big company, because we know they're gonna push against change, versus from the outset.
Yeah, I mean, I always have loved working with smaller organizations because you can change an organization so quickly. Because if the leader of the organization, often the founder, gets what we're doing and sees it as a way to build the culture of their business, you can make change so fast in a small company. Giant companies, I used to work for Merck, big pharma. You train people in certain things, you're not touching the culture. And it's a much easier thing to do. And I'd always prefer to work with small organizations because you can make change fast.
Yeah. I wonder. So then when you say that, I'm like, okay, then how would a big corporation change? I found myself, I don't spend the money to buy these suites at sporting events, but I was sitting in a suite for the MLS, just the soccer league, professional soccer league in the US. They just started their playoffs. And one of my business relationships invited me, say, hey, I got 2 tickets last minute, and I went to a suite. And in this suite were other people from significant sports organizations and someone who is on the ownership side of owning a professional, or not that team, but professional in this country. And we were talking about this in a way that wasn't even intentional. And what he said was, these sports leagues, whether it be the NHL, the NFL, the MLB, he said you can't get all of them to support culture change and making a significant impact on changing their business model unless every player on every team and then every team gets behind the idea of what you're going to do. That sounds like a big organization.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because this is an example, a number of years back, I worked with an insurance company. And when I was a culture change consultant, the first people you got to get to buy in is the C team, right? Because if not everyone on the C team's bought in, you're not going to be able to change a large organization. And so that's the first intervention. And early on, we went after the low hanging fruit, right? Which is getting rid of the bureaucracy. I was trained by my mentor, was in the school of Jack Welch when he was at GE. I go back that far. And they did workout, which was the simple thing of just let's rip out the unnecessary reports, the unnecessary approval layers, the unnecessary policies, and of course, there are unnecessary meetings, right? And so that's the first place you got to start in an organization with the C team. They've got to buy in, and then you work your way down through the entire organization. And that's often what we did when we were doing large company culture change.
All right. So to jump on the small side, because you're really passionate about this, on working with that founder. And so let's talk about 2025. If we can say, because we're not trying to solve for the unique outliers, because we'll sit here for 10 months and try to talk about every individual outlier. Is there something that you see, whether it's 70%, 80% on the majority of these founders and majority of the companies, that when you first show up, whether it's on screen or in person, that you kind of know what you're going to walk into without knowing the company? Do you have a strategy? Do you have a template?
Well, generally what the first thing we would do is contract with the founder and do an assessment, right? Because the truth is the frontline employees know what's really going on. And so you would always want to do an assessment of that, the founder and his or her team, right? Because often they're not talking. People don't talk straight together. So the first thing we would always do is gather data anonymously, put it back in front of the leader and say, this is what people aren't saying. Right. Because first thing we got to get people to do is have honest conversations. And, depending on the leadership style of the founder, right, a lot of times people may hold back, withhold information she or he needs to actually make good decisions. And so that's what we're trying to do is first create a culture of honesty. Everyone has integrity or candor as part of their core values. But that's one thing to have on a poster on the wall. It's another thing to get the senior team talking to each other in a way where they're giving real feedback to one another. And that's usually the first intervention. Assess what's going on, get them to talk more honestly amongst one another.
What happens then?
Well, then once we have the honest conversation, now we start talking about getting alignment around their vision, right? Where we see it. Now, the founder obviously often carries most of the vision, and the people around them have to execute against that vision, but they still have to get alignment around it. And often it's, the founder may not always be as skilled at communicating the vision. So we would then do that work. Then we would talk about their values because that's ultimately the culture, manifests from the values. So that's the kind of work we would do. We do work around the vision, the values, which then leads to what's the strategy. But it really is about, again, alignment on those core fundamentals, what we see as the future of the business, what are the values to get there, and then a strategy for how to do it. And that's the work you would do with any team, whether it's a giant company or a small team. That's the kind of work you have to do and get alignment.
Give me an example of a value.
Some people say integrity. Some people have the value of collaboration or teamwork. Some people have the value, at least, diversity. People have, those are values. So the core values that a company wants to live by. Now, most companies have the value statement, but they don't live by them, right? There's just, we had to do the work. So what you have to do is figure out, how do I build those core values into how I'm going to assess people, right? How I promote people, how I select and hire people. And so that's what I mean by a value. It's, the fundamental tenets for how you want to do everything in the organization.
Does the culture then derive from what the values are and how you act? Does a culture just show up based on who you are?
It shows up, honestly, based on the leader and their beliefs about people and their style. An organization goes where to the founder is, right? If the founder says collaboration is important, but he doesn't really value it, it's not real, then it doesn't show up. So honestly, the culture manifests from, in a small organization, the founder, the leader, they're going to create the culture because it's really going to be a reflection of what they believe is important in running a business. That's where it's going to generate from. Bigger companies, it's harder to shift the cultures.
So then if you need change, then the leader has to change, or else there's a gap they don't see that you have to fill.
Oh, an organization is only going to change as much as the person leading it is able to change. And a lot of times working with big companies, that's one of the reasons when you start at the C team level and you put in place the values, the CEO, she or he, they have to, be able to change if they really want to shift the culture. And sometimes when you start looking at the people below them, it's not just them changing. You may have to change the people, because they're so acculturated to a way of being. And if you're trying to shift the culture, those people may never get there. When you got people like me who are 61 years old, we don't change that well at our age, right? We've got ruts in the snow, and getting those ruts, like sleds keep getting in those ruts. It's hard to get out of those ruts the older we get.
Me being a centrist on so many things, I don't try to find the middle. I try to exist in the middle to say, hey, where's the truth? Not to be right, not to be wrong, to try to find the truth. But so often what we find is that takes a lot of humility, right? To be willing to go there where you're the leader and you're the one that's supposed to know. But I try not to make these really definitive big statements, because it seems like out of society, people are starting to, like, this is right or this is wrong. However, usually I see when people need to change, like in my life, the most painful things, what they came with is me changing. And I normally look out here in the world and the people I'm leading, or other managers and leadership team in my companies, all the way down to someone that starts out and they're not getting the outcome they want. What happens is they usually only change because of pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. You have to have felt need to change. And that's why some of the most successful organizations, right, when you go back and look at a lot of what the Fortune 100 was in the 1900s, I can't remember the stats, most of them are gone, right? Because the more successful we are, the more we think what we're doing works, and the more insular we are, and perhaps the most certain we are that we have the way. And in this day and age, and, I don't know what AI is going to do. But change is the one thing you can count on. Now, use the word of humility. That's a value. And I think it's an important value, because we all have a piece of reality, but we can't, the world is way too complex. So if I'm a leader and I'm humble, then I understand my job is to know how to get the best out of those people I'm leading. And that's where we try to help them learn a style of leadership we call collaborative leadership. Some people might call it servant leadership. There's so much jargon around leadership, but at its essence, it's the art of knowing how to engage a group of experts to help them make the best decision with limited information, get them to buy in and go implement. But humility, that's probably one of the most important things for founders, is to just realize we don't know what we don't know.
And unfortunately, you probably have to fail through some failure of leadership to get there because you're the one that came up with the idea. You were the driver. You're the one that works 7 days a week and you don't quit. And what you've had to do is you've had to be a force field against the world telling you can't. And as an entrepreneur, and so then you have to disconnect from that and say, hold on, wait a minute. If I'm going to grow this thing and this is about people, I need to surround myself with people that go all in with me, that are intelligent, that I need to step back and say, tell me what you guys know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's actually, and I'm sure that's the struggle for most founders is they carry the vision up against the world that says, no, that can't work. Right. So they carry that vision. And then when they get successful, they do have to, deal with the realities of, I got to have a payroll system, I've got to have a legal system. And I think it's struggles for certain founders to make the shift from being the entrepreneur to being the quote unquote manager because they don't like managing. It's not as fun as creating.
Did you read Ray Dalio's book, Principles?
I have not.
It's really dense. And he has, it is. I mean, you listen to the guy, he's really smart, but sometimes really, really smart people are tough to articulate to the average mind on what they're saying. But he has this idea, this word meritocracy has shown up in the past decade in our society. And it's kind of just the best idea, the best performance, the best thing wins, whether people like it or not. But he has this principle of, he ran his company on idea meritocracy. And it kind of goes in line with what we're talking about here. But what I love is he said, and I think I'm paraphrasing, but he stated that when you're in a meeting and you're in a room of people deciding things, hopefully not just talking about things, deciding things, the best idea has to win. And what I took from that book was, I said, let me frame this in my mind how I go into a meeting. I actually personally, this isn't anyone else, but again, if the leader's the one, if it's top down, I have to go into the meeting and I want to be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I want the pushback to help me make the better decision. And the problem is, this is big company jargon, but they're agile, right? A way to develop software. They have a term called HIPPO decision making, right? And the HIPPO is an acronym for the highest paid person's opinion, which is the founder, even though they may not getting paid because they're running the whole thing. They have a burn rate on the capital, but it has nothing to do with them, just the nature of hierarchy, them being the founder or them being the most senior person. People are going to want to not make themselves look wrong. So they're not going to be honest with the information that the founder needs to help him or her make the best decision. But it is hard when the HIPPO, they just, people are, they want to keep their jobs. So often the entrepreneur, the senior person gets shielded from the information they need to help them tell them you're wrong, right? That's not really what's happening out there in the market. And that is the challenge. That's why I said when we worked early, was trying to get the comfort with giving honest feedback, even when it's painful, right? And that is the hard thing. Just the nature of hierarchy suppresses conversations.
I mean, isn't it the leader's job to then create the environment, even if they find themselves in an environment where, because I've felt that at times, like, guys, I want the truth. I know I have this big personality. I'm coming at you and I'm very opinionated and stuff, but I had to actually tell them, like, I want you to push back. I want you to, you're a smart person. That's why you're in the room with me. I want you to highlight if I have a blind spot and there's something I don't see. Here's where the room's safe. It doesn't mean you're going to feel good about what we're going to do in here while we're doing it. It might feel crazy, but I want you to push back at a level because when we leave this room, we need to have the best decision. We need to have the best direction forward and the best that we can all come up with, whoever that is and that idea. We need to walk out of here with the direction this place is going.
Yeah. I mean, leadership, as I said, there's so many books you and I and articles read on leadership, but the simplest way we might think about our leadership is on a continuum, where on one extreme, you could run the meeting or the conversation where you're the expert. You know more than anyone else about the business, right? And you're making the decision for the group and telling them this is what we need to do, which is classic hierarchical leadership. And there are times you may know more than anyone else. And there are times you may certainly be making the decision for good, except wouldn't you rather first hear from the other people and invite them into a conversation so they've told you what you need to know to make the best decision? Because the other extreme, this is what we're teaching people, pure collaborative leadership is understanding how to remain neutral long enough. By neutral, I mean not influencing the decision by, if I'm the senior person, if I come in and tell people, immediately people are going to stop engaging. So to know how to come in and ask questions, in a way that allows the real ideas, you're talking about the marketplace of ideas, to surface, have the honest, let's just hash it out. And that's what we're teaching people, the art of neutral collaborative facilitation, even if at some point as the founder, I'm going to get out of neutral and say, I've heard it all. This is what I think the best idea is. This is what we're getting forward to. Now, as the founder, I'd love to reach consensus with my team where everyone agrees this is the idea we're going after. But that is the art of leadership, is knowing how to hold space long enough so that we've got the right conversation and make the best decision. And it's not easy because most people are trained as experts, right? They're
isn't
super
it the CEO's
smart.
job, right? And that's why maybe the founder, you really have to change and evolve and grow to then be the elite CEO, because you have to go from the person that had the idea, that had the vision, that through sheer force and belief and passion and culture, you built this thing. But then now if it's going to go bigger, you need 5 people that were like you to come in and run the different parts and silos of your organization. So you now need to go into the room and you need to be the one that selects the best idea.
Oh, yeah.
That's
exactly.
it, right?
You as the hippo may be the ultimate decision maker, right? But you want to make sure that your team has told you what's really going on so that you are actually, use the term, you don't have blind spots.
Yep.
We may make the wrong decision. The world is a complex world, but I don't want to make the wrong decision because we didn't have the conversation that could have helped us make the right decision.
So make the decision.
Really collaborative. Yep.
Yeah, make the decision and then be the person that gets everybody on board.
Yep. And now that's the alignment, because that's what we're teaching people. We always want, as a leader, the best possible decision with maximum buy-in and ownership. Now, you may never get it if you have a team of 12, all 12 online. But if you can get the right decision and have 10 people bought in, you'll deal with the 2 people who aren't bought in offline. But that's really the art of leadership, is helping groups make the best decision, get them to buy in and go implement. And that's really what we teach people and train people to do.
So you brought up Jack Welch and GE and their systems a lot. You didn't go into the HR piece of this, though, because in sales, what we heard as I was coming up through and before I even became an entrepreneur, started the company, there was this 4 tiers of performance of employees, this A, B, C, and D.
Exactly.
Right? And the thing that feels mean in this world we're in now is said, regardless, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know it better than me. I'm thinking I've read this and studied it and was taught this. Bottom 25% go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I mean, that's, if you tolerate the low performance, then you're diluting the bar for everyone. So I think Welch, it had these isoquants. It was the A players, the B players, the C players, right? You want to develop the A players, reward them, promote them. Now they've got to model the values, right? And G's values were speed, simplicity, and self-confidence. Right. And so you've got to make sure those A players are being rewarded, promoted. You're going to have B players there because they have to do things. But the C players, usually they saw 10 to 25%. We manage them out, which sounds brutal, right? I mean, it does sound brutal from a human standpoint, but the marketplace is brutal and you can't have that drag on your business. Now, when you're promoting C players, who might be A players from a business delivery standpoint, but C players from a living the values standpoint, what you're saying to the organization is the values don't matter, right? It's only results. And you have to have both pieces. You have to have people who get results, but do it in a way that models the values you'd like to have in your organization. And it is tempting to just put the values to the side. But Welch was looking at both pieces.
So, this is complex. And if what GE was talking about, if one of them is simplicity, this is complex. So I believe that when Warren Buffett and Charlie, when they bought companies, who knows if it's the complete truth, but they'd want to buy them on 1 and 2 sheet deals, not 1,500-page contracts. So can Evan design for a new business and entrepreneur coming in from a consulting perspective? Here's what you do in 1 sheet. To go from where you are to where you want to be, or I see where you need to be, it's 1 sheet. Can we simplify it that well?
Well, I mean, I want to be straight at this point, Mark, in my career, right? For decades, I'm doing culture change. Now, at this point, I'm just training people how this style of leadership works, because at 61, work-life balance is the most important thing to me. For a founder, not very important, right? They're going to obsess. So to get it down to that simple, at this point, I'm not in that consulting arena. And your thinking's excellent in that you should be able to, I'm trying to remember who the CEO was. You should be able to present your idea in one PowerPoint slide. Right now, what people did is they jammed it down and they got the font down to 3 points. They had so many things, but the idea needs to be simple enough that you could articulate it in one slide. And frankly, you shouldn't even need a slide.
Yeah,
right. And
it might have been Bezos or Jamie Dimon or something, because those guys, what they do, I want to get your idea on this. They actually do pre-writes for meetings, so everyone can pre-read.
Yeah, that's Amazon. They have a very unique culture on meetings. We've trained a few people from there, but it's very unique. It's really, you have to get your idea as the pre-read. You get in the meeting, you read that, right? And then they hash it out. It's a very different culture, that Bezos has created, quite unique in how they, run meetings. It's all about, I think they call it the narrative, right? It's something like that. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's very unique culture for meetings.
Yeah, if you hear from him too, because what we do is we talk about these high-flying companies that have changed the world, but we don't actually talk about like how they did it in a simplified way. And I also heard this thing about him. Again, you don't know if it's completely true, but he'll respond to emails with one word.
Yeah, that may be true. It better be a good word, because I've got to make a lot of assumptions based on that word.
Yeah.
It could be yes or no.
Or it could be what? It could be what with a question mark.
Right. Or go, no go. That's 2 words, right? And so
you get one of those responses back, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to remember, was it Andy Grove at Intel? All these could be apocryphal stories, right? You never know. But I think they said, if you don't get to the meeting on time, you don't get in. Because time, was so important. It's like, if you don't get there on time, the door was locked, you're not in. Now, how many meetings do you think an Intel executive needed in their career? 1, right? It's over. And that's, that was a value, right? It was like, time is everything, right? And we are not going to accommodate, people being late on meetings, let alone on delivering products to the market.
What do we do with all these studies? Because then that's a question I ask, and I have this issue that then I ask that question and I ask another one. But what do we do with that? But I'm going to do this intentionally. One of the best book studies ever. I love biographies of that. Walter Isaacson wrote Steve Jobs, and he wrote the Elon Musk one. He says he has some regret over the Musk one. I don't know if he would have said that if we weren't in the political times we're in, but he said it recently. He said, I wish I would have waited another 10 years. And so my response to that is like, well, then write another one. Right. But if you go to the Steve Jobs, when he was run out of Apple and they brought in the Pepsi CEO, and then Jobs went and started Next and Pixar and all that stuff. And then he put himself in the position where Apple was not performing well. He blames it on the CEO from Pepsi that came in on ruining the culture and running him out. But then he had them buy Next and Pixar from him at a crazy multiple. But he came back in and saved the company. But you talk how much of a maniacal, crazy person that he was. So have you thought about this conundrum of thoughts about Apple and that whole story?
Well, I mean, I know the story loosely. I think what happened to some degree is the bureaucracy probably got too thick, and Jobs had to come back in, blow it up, and just bring the value of innovation, right? Because at some point, we put these bureaucratic systems in, and it can suppress innovation. And so my guess is what happened is they lost the culture of innovation and needed the ultimate innovator back in there to inculcate that into the culture.
So what does someone do if they find themselves struggling to go from entrepreneur to professional manager? How do you evaluate if an outside professional manager that didn't come up through the culture? How do you figure that out? Should you do that or not?
Well, I think you should, but I have no idea how you do that, because, just using Pepsi as the business model for coming into a tech company, right? That's such a big culture shift. It would take a very skilled person to be able to make that shift, because, culture really is the hardest thing to change, right? And if I come in from a Pepsi where it's probably about systems and precision, Six Sigma, all these types of things, and bring that to a company that really has found an innovation, it may well, potentially kill the company. So again, these are questions beyond my skill set. In all honesty, Mark, you're
I
getting
don't
into
know that the
very
skill set
fundamental
though,
things.
but you don't evaluate these things.
Well, when we were doing culture change, yeah, we would evaluate and put in place, systems to try to have selection based on both performance and values, right? Because if I want a set of values to be inculcated, that has to be built into how I appraise people, how I select people, the HR systems of the business, who we promote. So yes, you do evaluate these, but you're talking about probably one of the greatest, entrepreneurs of all time, and Steve Jobs. And that situation, honestly, I wasn't working at that level in that kind of environment. I mean, that's as high stakes as it gets.
Hmm. When did you find yourself in life working at high stakes, the highest stakes you've worked at?
Well, I mean, the highest stakes I've worked at is with big culture change in large companies, right? And I'm talking large companies. Often I like working with companies that were 5 to 6,000 people, because if you're going to be a CEO, you're going to want a rock star to be your consultant. You're going to want someone from Harvard or Stanford, because they really are the ones who are doing the innovative work on organization development. Someone like me, we're working with CEOs who, maybe aren't in the sexiest industries, right? They're not high tech, insurance not as sexy, but the stakes are pretty high when you're working at the level of the C team. And I've done that a number of times in my career. And it's a challenge, right? It is a challenge to work at that level.
This sounds like self-deprecation.
Well, I don't know, self-deprecation. I'm just being honest, right? I mean,
but here's what I'm at. So you went to Duke, right? You landed your MBA from Michigan. I don't think, like Sam Zell, he was a Michigan grad. He got his law degree from Michigan. That guy he sold his company for $27 or $30 billion. He built the biggest commercial office real estate portfolio ever. So I don't think you have to go to Harvard or Princeton or Yale or MIT. I don't think you have to.
No, I mean, I think Peter Thiel will tell you in some ways going to university makes you dumber, right? I mean, I suspect a lot of entrepreneurs, because they fight the system as it is, probably college to them is incredibly restrictive. Yeah. And in this day and age, with all the things that are out there, that you can do for free, I think you can probably get self-educated, and a normal entrepreneur, college actually may not be right for them. I suspect we're going to see more and more people in this day and age not go to college, let alone cost so much money. There's not going to be jobs there. So, I think the real entrepreneurs, going to university credentials are not nearly as important as just who they are as a human being.
Yeah, the system person for Pepsi might benefit from that traditional education more versus the innovator at a tech company.
Yeah, I would think that's probably highly likely.
Yeah, but you mentioned, because you invoked that you would work maybe at 5,000 and 6,000 employees, but then you were probably talking like 100,000 employee organization that was coming out of Harvard and Princeton and stuff. But why were they well positioned to do it versus you? Because you're sitting in front of me, and I'm just telling you that the way you solve problems, you understand things, you're a process guy, you have an engineer's brain. I don't think those individuals are going to outperform you. Was there something about their system or some environmental thing?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there is a place for credentials. If I'm a CEO in a big, more bureaucratic company, not in a small startup, in some ways I want a consultant, right, to tell me what I want to do anyway. And I want a brand name. So I either want McKinsey, right, or some sort of brand name.
Yep. Or Deloitte doing some M&A stuff or something.
Yeah, because those companies do add value, but they have a brand where if I make a mistake as the CEO, I can blame it on them, right? And I would want that, right? Because they're at least road tested. And so, and a lot of the great sort of organizational change thinking is to some degree happening at the universities. Now, my mentor was on faculty at Michigan, but what he did is he went and worked for Jack Welch to build Crotonville, their leadership development university, because academia is one thing, you have to road test your ideas. And, I think, But if I'm a CEO in a big company, I want to make sure I get someone who's got a brand name, they've written books. I would want that, right? I wouldn't want some junior person who has no name to do that. I wouldn't hire someone like that. Just it's not safe.
Entrepreneurs don't know safety.
That is true.
So if you were starting something anew again right now, you've arrived at this place. You are still very young in your mind and your heart. That's not me. That's not flattery. I talk to a lot of people, and you are still very athletic in the way you're thinking. So if you were starting a new business now, even though you don't want that imbalance of being an entrepreneur and a founder, if you were, and you're the collaboration, the culture guy, where do you start? You're on that napkin, you're the one page. Where do you start? The product, the idea, or do you start how the company's going to operate? Where do you start?
I have to have an idea, right? I mean, you're going to minister around something, but you would have to have a great idea, which is the gem that you're going to wrap everything else around. But if you don't have a great idea, right? What are you going to sell? What are you going to do? So I think the entrepreneur starts with a great idea, starts with a vision of what that idea could be, understands the current state. That idea is going to be, pushed back on significantly because it's going to, I mean, look, disruption costs people jobs, right? When Uber came along, it cost jobs, right, of people. But that idea that you could have, everyone's a driver, it started with an idea.
Yeah, it's wild that what those taxi tokens used to sell for.
Yeah, incredible.
In Chicago, they were worth $250,000, $500,000, and almost overnight, they went to having no value. There was people that had those leverage. They had built multi-million-dollar empires on them, and it went to nothing. Is it almost impossible to see change inside the bubble coming?
I think it's very hard, right? Because, people have used the boiled frog metaphor. When we're successful, the environment around us is changing, the temperature is changing, and if the frog is in the boiling water, it's changing slowly, but by the time, it hits boiling point, the frog is dead. I think it's the same principle we talked about earlier. When you're very successful, right, what you've done has gotten there, it takes the humility to realize nothing is infinite. And you have to build real good feedback loops out there in the environment to try to your earlier point, tell you you're wrong quick enough that you can do something about. But I think it's very hard when you're inside, the culture of an organization to be agile enough to realize the whole world has changed. This taxi isn't worth anything. So,
yeah, maybe be not just being able, but being willing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a willingness, but I think that human nature is to, for the most part, keep doing we've been successful doing. And I've done, look, that happened to me as well. For decades, I was, training people face to face, right? Not really paying attention to these technologies, WebEx, live meeting, GoToMeeting were coming along. And back when early in my career, the most important communication part of a large organization was the mailroom. And you probably don't go back far enough to where we'd put things in these envelopes, we'd write names, and the mailroom got things out. This is pre-email, right? No one was envisioning email. It was snail mail. And email, when it came along, it was like all of a sudden, we don't need all these assistants, right? We don't have to worry about copying, because we had to photocopy things, copying too many people. Now you copy too many people. But just email changed the dynamic of communication. I mean, back then, I go back as far as the fax machine, right? That was a major innovation at the time. Now, it's very hard. The world's moving so fast. It's a very difficult thing to be an entrepreneur because that idea may not be relevant a year from now.
Yeah, we're sitting here talking about it in our bubble of the current time. So now we're online after 2020. GoToMeeting and WebEx, those went to Zoom and to other things, right? You didn't invoke that word for some reason. It must be like the new thing. You're like, it's already been done. Stop acting like it's new, guys.
No. Well, Mike, in some ways, when you look back, that's why this style of leadership, I think, is universal. I mean, I've trained people in all industries, all small organizations, giant organizations, done it around the world. I've trained doctors, lawyers, statisticians, IT engineers, biologists. It does not matter what culture we're in. It really doesn't around the world. It doesn't matter the industry we're in. And it doesn't matter whether I'm a doctor, lawyer, IT folks. When I go from being a knowledge worker, right, to having to lead other experts, I am forced to know how to get other people to collaborate. So it's very much independent, and technology can support us. But at the end of the day, although AI may change all this, it's going to be human beings who have to make the ethical decisions around things. The AIs are going to support them with a lot of business information and analytics, but it's still human beings trying to make decisions amongst themselves. And the reality is we're all dysfunctional human beings. We're all dysfunctional. So it is very hard to get a group of people to collaborate because we have egos, we have politics, right? That is the hard part, is the messiness of being a human being.
Understanding human nature, boy, the closer you can get to learning that and seeing it and engaging with it, the more capable leader you're going to be. Just seeing human nature at the basis. Before I look at the human, let me just see how humans in general act in this situation. And then let me stack on it my experience I've had with this individual. And then you can probably be a better leader for them.
Yeah, and there are different leadership styles, right? For some people, pushing very hard on them will be quite helpful. For others, that may put them into meltdown.
Yeah.
And so there is situational leadership, and entrepreneurs have situations that change over time. But at the end of the day, leadership is about articulating a vision, mobilizing people around that vision, right? And, making the right decisions to get, even if we get 80% of that vision, it may be good enough. But, I think entrepreneurs, that's what really, regenerates this society, because they're displacing businesses that have atrophied and really can't move with the times. But it's still maybe, I say maybe, human beings making decisions with support of AIs, but who knows? At the end of the
Tough
day,
to predict, isn't it? It's tough
we
to
may
predict.
we may all be irrelevant.
Yeah, we might be. Yeah, I heard the other day that in what the physicists believe now, and astrophysicists, what they believe now is that in 2.7 billion years, the Earth is going to collide with the sun anyway.
We won't be here to see that.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, and so if you want to go big and go out of this world thinking, it's like, what are we doing anyway then? What are we doing?
Yeah, we're a very small part of this universe.
Whatever's going on.
We all have egos, and what's in front of us is the most important thing in the world, right? And that's totally understandable. And an entrepreneur, what's great about them is they have a vision, they have passion, and they are obsessive about it, right? They are going to do whatever it takes to get there. And at some point, they will have to.
The ones
who win. Yeah, the ones who win. I mean, they are relentless. And at some point, though, they do need some managerial structure around them once that idea has proven to be the right idea. And that's in many ways what we're doing, is trying to build a culture at the most fundamental level, right? I've asked questions, two questions of leaders. I asked it 5,000 times the last 33 years. How many meetings are going to take place in your organization? And of course, that's based on scale. In a small startup, there may be one, right? But when I work with a big company with 200,000 people, they may say, I don't know, when I think of the one-on-ones, 500,000 meetings today, right? Now, that's going to be based on scale. The second question I've asked them for 30 years, what's the average effectiveness of a typical meeting you attend? 0 to 100%. I would say 90% of the time, people say 50% or less. And I sit here with clients and I say, this is insane. From a business productivity standpoint, you're going to run 100,000 meetings today, and you told me you're going to run them at 50%. This is a massive loss. Now, I don't know if you ever read Patrick Lencioni's The Five Dysfunctions of Teams, right? His first book was Death by Meeting, right? Which I don't know that you need to read that one, but The Five Dysfunctions is great. His first book has a great quote, though. We run bad meetings. It almost always leads to bad decisions, which is a recipe for mediocrity, performance mediocrity, productivity loss, frankly, morale creating in an organization if I have to be in all these awful meetings, and it's a recipe for something else. If I'm the one running these 50% or less effective meetings over and over, it's a recipe for people seeing me as a bad leader because I'm wasting their time. And people, they don't hate meetings. What they hate is wasting time. right? And so as I build and scale my business, I'm going to need some meetings. They need to be run well, and they cannot waste people's time, and they've got to deliver the right decisions and get buy-in of the group. And that's what we do.
High level, how do we run a good meeting? I know that's way more in depth, but just in general, how do you run a good meeting?
I'll give you a couple fundamentals here. Metaphor we like to use for running a project, a workshop, a meeting. 3 parts: takeoff, flying, landing. Now, takeoff doesn't take a lot of time, right? You're in Cincinnati. I'm in Denver. Last time I was out at DIA, I timed it. From the time they hit the jets to wheels up, it was 42 seconds. If it doesn't go well, we're all dead, right? Most of the flight is getting to Cincinnati airspace. Second place I got to pay attention to is landing. But here's the simplest thing. We teach people, and your listeners, you can write it down. It's an acronym. It's called the POPRA model. P stands for the purpose. O stands for the objectives. Second P stands for the process. R stands for the roles. A stands for the agreements. Most meetings should never be allowed out of the hangar on the tarmac, because whoever called it did not get clear why we're having the meeting and what are we trying to get done, which means they are guaranteed to waste people's time. So if someone can't answer why we're here and what we're trying to get done, you shouldn't be allowed to have a meeting, because I can't design the flight plan if I don't know the destination. If I don't get clear, I'm going to Cincinnati, right? I'm going to end, down in Austin or somewhere, because the process now follows the clarity of the why and the what, the vision, the purpose, the mission, the what. And then I have the flight plan, which is the process. If I don't know what we're trying to get done, I can't make good decisions who should really be there and also who should not be there, because there's too many people in our meetings, and the roles I need them to play. One of the roles being who's the ultimate decision maker, right? Who is going to ultimately decide if we can't reach consensus once we've surfaced all the ideas. And then the last A is the agreements, which is how do we need to interact, right? Stay focused, have these honest conversations, push back on ideas, not necessarily people, the agreements. So that POPRA model, that's the start. Takeoff is everything. And most meetings should never be allowed to happen. The when we let them happen, they now need to be well run. So inside the meeting, the key to getting honest conversation is knowing how to hold space so people weigh in. And that's what we're teaching. The tools of asking before telling, knowing some simple thing. Now, I'm going to give your listeners one of the simplest tools. People don't do it. I don't know why, but we call it a simultaneous chat. We're all on these virtual meetings. We have the chat. And what happens is the same thing that happens in the room. The same people are always weighing in the chat. And they're often the senior people or the extroverts or the fiery red styles. What a simultaneous chat is slow things down. Pose the question you want the group to answer. Don't let them hit enter on the chat. Make them all prepare their answer in the chat, and then say, all right, we're going to submit these ideas simultaneously so that they're not looking at what the hippo is going to say. They all of a sudden, we usually use hand raise reaction emoji to say you have to have something in here. We're not going to submit to everyone's hand raise. And then you say, all right, let's put a banner and stream it in. All of a sudden, you're hearing from the junior people. Maybe they're people of color. Who knows? Maybe they're introverts. Maybe they're speaking English as a second, third language, because it often can be that most junior person, right? Who might be an introvert, analyzing style, working English as a third language, who has exactly the expertise to help the hippo make the best decision, but we can't create space to weigh in. So that's the other thing that's key. And then the other place we got to pay attention to meetings on landing. Right? We have all these plane crashes and landing because we don't leave time for it. People drop out of the meeting and we're not clear. What do we do? Just agree on what are we doing next? What's the action plan? Who's going to do what by when? So at the beginning, though, to your question, just make sure you're clear why, what, how, who, in what way you're going to run the meeting, and don't have meetings if you can't answer those 5 questions.
This guy's brilliant, y'all. I could sit here and talk to you for another hour or two, but unfortunately, he values the balance of his personal time. Evan Unger, this is awesome. I appreciate all the experience you've shared with us. I'm listening for the past 5 minutes, and I'm connecting that with the things I've done well and the things I haven't done well. And I couldn't poke one hole in what you just said about running meetings.
Most meetings shouldn't be allowed to happen. They really shouldn't. We meet to meet, and too many people show up because, everyone says FOMO, there's a fear of missing out. And so we have all these people at the meeting who could be doing something more useful, right? And that's what we're teaching people, the art of high stakes workshop type facilitated meetings, real decision making. right? We're deciding how we're going to roll a product out or how we're going to allocate scarce capital, major decisions. And there is an art to that. It is an art of leadership. And most people are never trained in this. And founders may not need to worry about this early. But as they start getting to the place where I got to start building the culture of the organization, that's the place this style of leadership is fundamental to inculcating a culture where the great ideas come to the surface. So, Mark,
So
it's been
good.
my pleasure.
Hey, I'm going to go back and listen to this myself. I'm serious. No, this is good. This is going to be so many good tidbits. So, hey, what's the one place you want them to go to your website or go to LinkedIn or where do they come in?
Yeah, they could go to either our website landing page. I assume you'll put it in the show notes or my LinkedIn page. There's only 6 Evan Ungers, and I probably am the one with the goofy grin and the blue check shirt. There's only 6 of us out there. And so either way, they can get to my website through my LinkedIn page or go to our landing page. I'll send you that. And Mark, this has been a pleasure, privilege, and I so appreciate the time.
Thank you. This was awesome.